Welcome back to SUP FM, and this week we're interviewing Tez Plavenieks, who is the editor of standuppaddlemag.co.uk. He's been around stand-up paddle in the UK since inception in 2006-2007, and we're picking his brain about how to buy your very first paddleboard.
Aloha, and welcome to SUP FM, the podcast for stand-up paddleboarders everywhere. So with no further ado, let's get out on the water and on with the show. Here are your hosts, Nick and Simon.
Well, welcome to SUP FM, Tez. It's really great to have you on board.
Thank you. Happy to be here. Happy to help.
That's great. Yeah. So, if you could just give us a little brief overview about how you got into SUP, because I think you've been doing stand-up paddle for a long time now, right?
Yeah, relatively long time. I mean, I was certainly sort of one of the original UK adopters in my local area, if you want to call it that. I mean, basically, I actually attribute two people to my stand-up tie-in, if you like. One of whom was John Hibbard of Red Paddle Stroke Starboard fame. I actually watched him at a windsurf festival turn up with a stand-up paddleboard and go out on a windless afternoon with everybody looking on from the beach going, what the hell are you doing? What is that you're riding? But my initial interest was sort of pricked at that point.
When was that about?
That was around about sort of 06, 07. It was actually, I live on Hayling Island. And for those people listening who are into sort of windsurfing, they'll probably appreciate the link Hayling Island has with windsurfing. It was where Pete Chilvers, back in 1958, originally invented the windsurfer by attaching a sail, for want of a better term, to a makeshift wooden plank, which you would probably call a board these days. And with that,
so it wasn't invented in Hawaii.
No, Pete was actually the windsurfing, whole different sort of ball game kind of fish.
Tangent.
But in a short sort of bite-sized description of windsurfing, Pete invented the sport. But then it was Hoyle Schweitzer and Jim Drake in 1968 who actually brought the sort of modern form of windsurfing kit to the masses. But in the 80s, it was those three, Jim Drake and Hoyle on one side and Pete on the other, who went through a massive court case patent battle to determine actually who was the original godfather of the sport. Pete actually won out, and he's now noted as being the original person that invented that sport, but Hoyle and Jim still get the credit for sort of bringing, the original windsurfer to the masses. But the point being is, if Pete hadn't have done that back in the day with windsurfing, then Hayling wouldn't have the sort of reputation as being a centre of excellence for many different water sports, not least stand-up. So
right, and it's the National Water Sports Festival every year there as well, isn't it?
Exactly that. Sort of when I saw John first out on a stand-up paddleboard, that was when it was in its, I think it was the second year, and it was still called the Fat Face Night Windsurfing event at that point. But you're right, Nick. Now, Alan Cross, the organiser of NWF, has sort of included all forms of, a number of forms of water sports, and stand-up's one of those. But yeah, it was seeing John sort of paddle out and me going, what's he doing? A couple of years later, I actually had a bit of an accident where I broke my ankle. And I was sitting on the beach one windy afternoon, looking forlornly out to sea at some pretty sick conditions, wishing I was out there. And another guru of windsurfing, Jem Hall, turned up on the beach, and he basically said to me, when you're fit and well, you need to get out on a stand-up board, because that will basically help strengthen your ankle and get you ready back in it for windsurfing full power again. And I was like, yeah, okay, cool. And literally a couple of weeks later, my wife tried it first. I thought, that looks easy, I'll get on board. I got on board and promptly fell off. Had a bit of a tantrum, threw the toys out of pram, stomped back off up the beach, thinking that it was stupid. Watched Fee, my wife, again paddle off into the distance, and think, you know what, I'm not letting her get one up on me. And then gave it another go, persevered with it, and yeah, sort of got straight into it really within sort of 10-15 minutes. And
the next thing, you're running a magazine all about stand-up paddle.
Yeah, that's a bit of a that's taken a while to get to that point. In the interim, I've sort of my background, my sort of experience, if you like, is sort of digital content creation, curation, management, social media marketing and strategy, and sort of various parts of the content makeup for the digital webosphere, if you want to call it that. And off the back of that, I also edited Windsurf magazine for 2 years. So that's kind of how I sort of got into the whole writing and editing lark. But back last year, after spending another year previous to that talking to a couple of different big publishing houses about the idea of setting up a UK-centric paddleboard magazine, I'd sort of hit a brick wall with that, because big corporates sometimes don't always move quick enough, if you like. And I'm quite an antsy kind of person. Some would say impatient. And it just got to a point where it just wasn't moving forwards. I'd already done a bit of work for the Paddler e-zine, which is now the Paddler magazine, which, for those who know SUP Mag UK, will be aware that the Paddler is from the same stable, run by Pete Tranter and Anne Egan. And I knew through my involvement with that Pete and Anne were looking for another project. And I was basically like, you know what, these guys seem on it and bang up for it. So I approached them. And they were up for the idea. That's also having, previous to that, run standuppaddlesurf.co.uk, which was a website that actually John Hibbard set up. And that was really the first incarnation of what SUP Mag UK is. Unfortunately, between myself and John running Red Paddle and getting, pretty smashed with that kind of work, he didn't have time to dedicate to that. And I, to sound shallow and fickle, needed something that paid a bit more. And also there were a few development issues with the site as well. So that kind of fell by the wayside. So there was definitely a gap in the market for a UK-based, focused, centric paddleboard publication, which brings us to where we are now, second year in.
Fantastic.
Doing okay.
So obviously, that's great news. So obviously you, in your capacity as an editor of the magazine, you choose a lot of boards and you go through a lot of board reviews and things like that, right?
Yeah, kit testing is quite a big thing with the mag, yeah.
All sorts of products, don't you, Tez?
Yeah, I mean, the sort of one of the things that we picked up on, and one of our unique selling points of the magazine, this is not me trying to sell the magazine. You either like it or you don't. But one of the things that I sort of want to focus on as a goal is to get information and knowledge out there regarding specific stand-up paddleboarding kit across all of the disciplines as much as possible, but also the accessories and related products that make up the whole paddleboarding SUP lifestyle thing, in the UK. And Simon, yes, you kindly sent over some of your gear. There's a plug for Hutch SUPwear.
Thanks very much.
Which we reviewed and was sort of received really well by the majority of the readers, so that was all good. But yes, I mean, kit reviewing and testing, again, that stems from my days at Windsurf Mag, and I know how much readers crave that kind of information. I mean, at the end of the day, getting sort of good impartial views on SUP kit, particularly in the UK, in this country, is pretty hard. You can find the marketing stuff, But at the end of the day, marketing is marketing, and what people really want is to get, a view that's unbiased as much as possible. Yeah, I mean, we all have our favourite bits of kit, but yeah.
Sure, absolutely. Because picture this. I mean, there's so many people coming on board into stand-up paddle these days, whether it comes from various other disciplines or just brand new people to board sports. And I remember myself when I was just starting, and I just opened up Starboard's website, and I just saw there's millions and millions, well, not millions, but,
loads,
tens of different, loads of boards.
Yeah.
And I was just absolutely flummoxed. And I think many people out there obviously feel the same way. And what did your first piece of advice be for people who are just brand new, don't know what's going on, and what board to choose and what board to buy?
I think if you're a newbie to SUP, I think the first thing is to keep it simple. I think that you can, like you say, get completely overwhelmed by, styles of boards, disciplines that boards fit into, categories of rider, and constructions as well. At the end of the day, as a beginner, you want something that's going to float you. It needs to be stable. It probably needs to fit a variety of paddling disciplines, because I'd be surprised if, maybe you have seen Laird, dropping into 15-foot chopu or whatever, but you're not going to do that straight off. You want to get on the water, paddle around, get those fundamental and foundation skills nailed down, and then possibly progress in time. So, your first board, if you like, definitely needs to be an all-round type of stand-up paddleboard. You may want to go into waves. You'll probably do the majority of your paddling to start with on flat water. You may hear various terms such as downwinding, river SUP, and the rest of the jargon that comes with the sport, and you may investigate those different terms and think, actually, you know what, I thought I might want to get into this part of the sport, but actually I'm going to aim for that part of the sport, which is absolutely fine. And your original all-round board will probably stay with you right through the years, because as much as you want to focus on one part of stand-up, what you'll probably find is that you'll still do everything, or as much of everything as you possibly can, because unfortunately conditions for those specific parts of SUP don't happen every day, not unless you live in Hawaii, like you've already mentioned, Nick. It's one of those annoying things with Mother Nature, unfortunately.
Yeah. So let's hone in on this all-round board, because then afterwards we can talk about different disciplines, because I've got 8 disciplines all laid out here.
Right.
So, for example, an all-round board, I could turn around and say, okay, you've got to buy a 10/6 32-inch wide board and do it. But obviously it's different for different people, right?
Yeah, definitely. 10-foot boards in the UK are by far the biggest selling boards still, and have been for years. In fact, stick the word inflatable in that as well. Inflatable ice-ups, whatever you want to call them, are still proving to be extremely popular in the same kind of spec. Something, as you rightly say, stand-up paddleboards are all sort of reflective of people's overall body shapes, weights, and abilities. You may come into SUP being a newbie, having done some paddling before. Likewise, you may come into SUP having done nothing at all before. At the end of the day, you want to give yourself as much of a fighting chance as possible. So width plays a big part, as you just picked up on. You mentioned 32 inches wide in stand-up is, a fairly big board, equates to a fairly big board. If it's got 32 inches of width, it's probably going to have a decent amount of volume, packed in volume being thickness. As a simple explanation, there's a bit more to it than that, but keep it simple, thickness. The more stable the board, the thicker the board, the more volume the board, the more stability, the more overall fun you're going to have, and the less likely you are to fall in. Although falling in is still part of the sport, and if you're not falling in, you're not trying hard.
If you're not falling in, you're doing it wrong. Yeah,
exactly.
But I had an interesting person said something to me the other day, which I found quite interesting, because I was paddling on an inflatable, and it's about 6 inches thick.
Yeah,
and they said that they felt that a hardboard was actually more stable than this inflatable, which is sort of bobbing around on top of the ocean, not being. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, sort of inflatable boards generally are, as you say, quite thick, so they ride pretty high, and because they're full of air, there's always going to be some play or slight wobble. I mean, at the end of the day, you know, it's an air board. You know, there's no getting away from that. Some brands, you know, this year RRD, for instance, are incorporating stringers in their boards. Corran SUP, we tested their Thunder 12.6 last year for the magazine, and Corran Addison, for those who don't know, he's a bit of a design wizard, but he's also got a real sort of long heritage within paddle sports. He's an ex-kayak champion, and he definitely thinks out the box. And he sort of incorporated this carbon, almost like sort of fishing poles, if you like, telescopic fishing poles or tent poles, which slot into webbing straps, which are attached to the deck, and he calls it an exoskeleton. So that was designed to add rigidity to the board. Starboard have Red Paddle have a patented carbon rail insert technology, which adds rigidity. And all these things, you know, they do their best to sort of up inflatables technology and get it to feel as close to a rigid board as possible. But ultimately, it's still going to be an inflatable for now. That may change. So you're always going to have that slight wobble. You know, like I say, I'll call it play in the board when compared to a hard board. And because they ride higher, you've got more chance, or there's more area of the board's rail that can get hit by chop, and also an air board is going to be slightly lighter, and therefore more flyaway, certainly in wind and breeze, that kind of thing. Whereas a sort of hardboard will tend to sit lower. You know, I mean, this is all relevant to shape and purpose of each different board. You know, there are nuances across all boards in all ranges, but this is a very much a generalisation. But rigid boards will sit lower. I mean, and
slice through the water, obviously.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you know, I actually have a Red Paddle all water 9.6, which I've taken sort of on trips before, and that's got a reduced volume concept in it, so that actually sits lower in the water and doesn't sort of suffer from that sort of wobble or play, if you like. So there are.
Yeah, I've got an 11-foot board as well, 11-foot red, and it's pretty thin these days. The 2015 sport, so they're getting better. But
exactly, and this is the thing. There's more than one way to skin a cat, as the saying goes, and there's, you know, as much as what I've just said is a broad generalisation, there are sort of designs that buff that trend, if you like. You know, it's just a case of looking. Unfortunately, going back to what you were saying, where you click on a website of one of the bigger brands and you're inundated with kit, you know, showing in front of you. Where do you start? That's the problem. You know, it's easy if you've got a bit of a grasp of the SUP industry, but where do you start? That's the tricky bit.
Sure. So hopefully our guys out there, all of you listening in, are now looking for an all-round board, or a cruiser, or an explorer, or a touring board. Correct?
Touring boards, actually, what you just mentioned there. Touring boards are. There's a lot of discussion about touring boards within the industry at the moment, because for a long time,
trendy, yeah.
Trendy, yeah, but actually for 2015, touring boards now are incredibly versatile, and there's an argument to say, should they actually be the go-to board for anyone who's had a small degree of paddleboarding experience, and then obviously they will stay with you through your whole paddleboarding career. All-round boards the sort of rounded nose types, which we were talking about a little bit before, they've got their place. But actually, and I don't like the term touring boards, to be honest with you, because that suggests that you're going to be doing marathon paddles along your local river or coastline or whatever, exploring nooks and crannies. Yes, that's part of it, but actually a touring board these days is more about the all-round stand-up experience. They can be taken in waves, small waves, and ridden well in small waves, believe it or not. Good example of that is JP's Hybrid 11 foot and Narsquell's Fit 11 foot, which actually ride waves really well. But obviously they've got the pointy noses as well. So they cover distance on flat water much, much better than rounded nose all round SUPs. And of course, you can race them if you want to. They actually, they hold, they're never going to be as full on as a top spec, Fanatic Carbon Falcon, for instance, but they will hold their own. And this is the good thing. But the term touring board, I'm not entirely sure whether that promotes the right image as to what these boards do. But they're definitely worth considering if you're in the market for a SUP, having never bought one before.
And okay. Sorry, Tez, with the touring board, what's the sort of options in terms of width? So if you were a beginner, not sure whether to get one or not, is there a sort of standard width for it?
Standardisation within any water sport, to be honest with you, is not really a done thing. I don't know why. They sort of touring boards for 2015 certainly are sort of coming in around about 11 foot and anything from 30 to 32 inches width. If you're on the lighter side, smaller in stature, then you'd probably err more towards one with 30 width. And then obviously, if you're a bigger bone individual, then you'd probably go more towards 32. Yeah, well, I mean, it depends what you want, and obviously your local conditions play a big part as well. I mean, down here on the south coast of Hayling Island, we get sort of quite a lot of breeze, chop, that kind of thing. If you're a newbie and you're not super confident in your paddling ability, then you'd probably want the wider, more stable board. Mm-hmm. Likewise, if you're on an inland sort of canal, stroke, river, non-moving water, then you'd probably plump for, a less wide board. But then there are all the other things that come into play, like width, volume, and obviously, the hull contours. But that's getting probably a bit too technical for what most sort of newcomers would be looking at.
I just feel that most board manufacturers may be offering boards for sort of lighter people. I suppose that I'm 100 kilograms, so right. I just found it rather difficult. I think obviously the average human being is a little bit lighter than me. So I suppose
so. I know what you mean.
It just feels that there's not enough offered in the 100 kilogram range because. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to offer, but still, I just found it a bit difficult in the beginning to try and figure out what board to use.
I think if you're sort of on the sort of heavier end of the weight spectrum, then you're probably going to be less well catered for. You're right. Manufacturers, and this is across all water sports as well. It's the same with windsurfing. It's the same with kite surfing. It's the same with surfboards, snowboards, whatever you want to look at. The manufacturers produce kit to fit the average because the average is the average and therefore mass. Unfortunately, if you're either side of that, then it becomes trickier. However, there are the products out there that will benefit you. It's just a case of wading through to find what you think on paper looks suitable. And then the tricky part is actually getting to have a go of that piece of equipment,
So the ideal thing is to try and get to a demo day or something like the National Water Sports Festival or something similar in the US, and to try and explore and just try as many boards as you can, like get your mates' boards.
Definitely. I can't stress that enough. I mean, in fact, the editorial for the imminent magazine is going to be along similar lines to what you've just said there, which is encouraging paddlers to get out there this year and attend any of these events and these demos. There are more than ever now available, and obviously with more manufacturers in the marketplace, that means more toys to play with. Yes, it's a time-consuming thing. Yes, it can be frustrating, and yes, you can jump on one board, jump on another, jump on three before you know it. You've tried 6, and then you're back to square one because suddenly they all feel the same. It's like kit blindness almost. So it will only become clear, I suppose, on reflection. But definitely, trying as much product kit as you possibly can is a good idea. Retailers as well. Retailers have now got extensive demo fleets of their own. Obviously, retailers are tied into certain brands. That's as standard. But there are a lot of retailers around there that stock different brands. So you can always go to one weekend, and then obviously go to another the next weekend. Sure. But yeah, trying as much as you can is definitely worth it.
And sorry, funny you say that, because I was out this afternoon, Tez, for a couple of hours on the river and cruised into shore, and there were, I don't know, about 20, 30 women standing there on the shore. I thought they were there just to look at me come in beautifully on my
was that the Fat Stick Ladies Who SUP night or something
exactly
like that, was it?
Exactly, yeah. Right. So there's a local independent brand called Fat Stick, and the turnout was just incredibly impressive. So
it's great. I mean, it's great to see women getting involved as well, and it's also great to see a brand focusing on ladies specifically rather than us bigger, burly, gruffer male types.
Exactly, and our discussion so far has been sort of fairly male-centric, not surprisingly. But one of the great things about SUP is, the female involvement, and certainly a lot of the major international figures are women. We've got quite a few coming as guests on the program.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, from my standpoint, I'm married to somebody who is actively involved in all of these types of sports. So I have a vested interest, to see that side of the industry evolve and, not fall by the wayside like some other sports have. I mean, at the end of the day, SUP needs to be, it is already, but it needs to continue to sort of have that mass appeal across all demographics, and that's kids as well. I'm a big fan of getting youth into this sport. I mean, at the moment, certainly in the UK anyway, there's a bit of a slant slightly towards the done fairly successful middle-aged bloke, should we say?
Yeah, funny you mentioned that, because last week we had on Anthony Hoekmes from suptrotters.com,
right?
And he was talking about the demographic, and it was spot on, 45 years old male, but obviously with a large proportion of females. I think he was talking about 30 to 40% of females on his site, which probably is about right, maybe even higher percentage of females in stand-up paddleboard today.
Yeah, I think, you go to any venue at the moment sort of around the country, and it's surprising to see how many ladies are actually getting involved, which is great, and I think some of the brands are actually missing that. I mean,
well, there's a lot of them cater for they've got female boards and female branded boards, but now as a woman trying to start, or a lady trying to find your first board, surely most of the above applies. I mean, they're looking for something in the all-round category.
Yeah, for sure, definitely. It would just be the spec is obviously going to be downsized to what you or I would be looking at. That's the thing. It's all that sort of, your body type, your weight, the area you paddle in most, and that's the key thing as well. The area you paddle in most, not where you aspire to paddle or the conditions you aspire to sort of ride in. It's where you paddle most, where you're going to get the most use out of the kit that you're going to buy. All those are relative to you as an individual. Be you a 25-year-old university female student, a 10-year-old Grom coming up through the ranks, or a 45 to however old you want to go, burly bloke, looking to just do some general mild paddling.
And that brings me to all the different disciplines that new paddlers may not know about. I mean, I've got 8 listed here. There's just go through them quickly. I mean, there's wave and surfing, obviously. Mm-hmm. The second one we touched on was cruising, exploring / touring, whatever term you would like to use.
Yep.
The third one would be racing. Mm-hmm. Fourth, whitewater rafting and going down rivers. Mm-hmm. The fifth one are yoga and fitness SUPs, which all have their different characteristics. Yep. 6, inflatables, which I wouldn't say is really a discipline but anyway. And obviously downwinding is a huge, big, exciting area.
Yeah. And then you've got obviously wake SUP as well. I mean, I remember seeing a couple of years ago that Boardworks, I think it was Boardworks, had started to manufacture a wake surf specific stand-up paddleboards. So that's essentially surfing the boat wake of a wakeboard boat.
With or without a cord?
Without the rope. Yeah, without the rope. I mean, there's a few videos online of people behind sort of wakeboard boats surfing the wake, and also a few videos online of people surfing. I think something I saw that recently was surfing the wake of a paddle steamer.
I've seen that in the gorge in the west coast of USA somewhere.
Yeah. I mean, you've got fishing. I mean, that's. I mean, I'm also. Some people may be aware. I'm also involved in editing another online magazine, which is to do with Sisson kayaking, and fishing is a massive part of that sport. And it's not quite so big in SUP yet, but it could be.
Absolutely. I mean, I've been out a few times, and there are so many advantages with fishing from a stand-up paddleboard versus kayaks. I mean, I was paddling along. You can see the fish, and you know where to cast. So, so it's definitely advantageous doing it from stand-up paddleboard. Problem is, if you get a really big catch, you might end up in the middle of the channel.
Yeah. But I think we'd welcome it here in the Algarve, because most of the people fish off these huge cliffs we've got, and half of them fall off the bloody cliffs.
Oh, really?
So it'd be much better if they actually were on stand-up paddleboards.
Yeah, definitely. I mean,
there's so many different types of boards to choose from. It's absolutely staggering, isn't it?
It is. I mean, I was just going to say as well, like one of the other areas that we think, and I was actually talking to Chris Martin from Agent 8 about this. Now, Agent 8 currently imports JP gear, and they do have a connection already with Imagine Surf, which is the brand fronted by Dave Kalama. Dave Kalama, obviously one of the icons of ocean sports in general, but certainly big wave surfing and stand-up. And between myself and Chris, we were sort of saying that, the whole adventure paddling thing could be bigger than everything. And by that, I mean, you jump on your stand-up, you've loaded it up with your gear for the weekend or however long you're going to go off for. You may have a couple of fishing rods, you've got your camping gear, you've got your stove, all your food supplies, you sort of bivvy tent that you're going to sleep in, sleeping bags, all that kind of stuff. All your essential gear loaded in dry bags on the front or back of your board, and off you go, wherever that may be, and you're going to explore, you're going to tour, you're going to come back, you're going to go feral for a few days. That kind of stand-up paddleboarding, that could be the one that actually sells it, really, moving forward.
It's really exciting as well. We interviewed Tati Coco Sup. I'm not sure if you're aware of her. And she did an adventure around Sardinia for 600 kilometers.
Yeah, pretty full on.
Yeah, it's amazing. She was talking about her, how the stuff she went through is quite incredible. But also, there's obviously Dave Cornthwaite who went down the Mississippi.
Yeah, Dave, I know Dave very well. His shenanigans are pretty legendary, to be honest.
Yeah, it's great.
And Matt Crompton as well. We've got
yes,
So who's got a fantastic book about his travels, which we both consumed. But absolutely. I've got my sight on the Thames at some point this summer, if I get a bit of leave from my wife.
Sorry, the one thing about a river is it was so difficult to find the source, really. I mean, I suppose you have an official source of the Thames, but then you get into that very small little bits and pieces of water when it's very shallow at the top.
Yeah, and the problem we have as well in the UK from an inland waterway point of view is access. I mean, I don't know if you guys or anyone listening has sort of been watching the news, but our current governing party, if you like, has got a certain individual who's got a vested interest in sort of reducing access to inland waterways because it basically makes up part of his revenue stream. Now, I don't want to get heavily political or anything like this, but, you know, at the end of the day, inland waterways are there, and actually, as public, we all have access, but certain individuals within the establishment try to limit that access, which is a shame because that is a whole area of stand-up which could be bigger than any kind of SUP on the coast, you know, and the whole adventure paddling thing, fitness. In fact, most of the disciplines, apart from obviously wave surfing, you know, could be bigger on inland water than they would be at the coast. But it's just a case of whether we can get the access to that and, you know, not take away from fishing revenue.
Far be it from me to encourage civil disobedience, but I think I read the same article. And one of the great things about British law is there's usually a law dating from 1650 or something which allow us to do stuff. So apparently there's one of those. I'm not a lawyer though, so
it's definitely the same article we read then there, Simon.
Yeah.
Just to get back on track about the choosing a board, I think we basically covered a lot of ground here. I mean, obviously we haven't gone into every single different discipline to try and choose a board for that
as well.
No, it's been fantastic hearing your stuff, Tez. It's really, really great. But it almost feels like we could do an episode on every single discipline itself.
Oh, for sure, definitely, yeah. And I'm no expert in all of them. I mean, there are the people out there that would be best, you know, suited to talk about each individual aspect of SUP than me. And you know, they're there. And I think, you know, your listeners, our readers would love, you know, for those people to step forward and sort of get involved with this kind of thing, because knowledge is power after all. And at the moment, you know, there's still a lot of knowledge which isn't being passed on through nobody's fault. That's not a criticism. It's just the way it is for the time being. But I do think moving forwards, we're going to get, you know, more of that knowledge come to the fore. And before long, I do agree with what Laird Hamilton said a few years ago when SUP first sort of emerged, and that, you know, it could be bigger than surfing. This could. I do believe that.
Absolutely, because there's just so much more chance of it. I mean, isn't it wonderful to see? I remember Simon telling us about how he first saw stand-up paddling. He was in the middle of France, and this guy came along and picked up a board and just went off surfing in the canal without a wave.
Yeah.
And you're right. There's just so much more opportunity wherever there's a lake and a river. But,
or duck pond, or the bath.
Yeah, exactly. So, Well, Tez, thank you so much for all your
input. No problem. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's been fantastic, and I hope we can speak again about a few of these different items.
Good stuff. And apologies once again if I've bored everybody. I'm sorry.
Not boring at all. It's exciting stuff. Great. Well, thanks very much, and we'll see you soon. Thanks, Tez.
No worries. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to SUP FM, the #1 podcast for stand-up paddlers wherever you are. If you like what you've heard, please leave us a review on iTunes. Until then, we'll see you in the water.